The transition that you talk about to getting into Artful Living, the ground floor, okay, so they were a company that you worked with on the other side, essentially, right? And then they sort of brought you in. What was that actually like? How did that work so that you didn't, I guess, burn bridges with the company that you were leaving in order to go into Artful Living? Just walk us through that.
Yeah. So, and I should add, when I got out of journalism school, and when I say that there were no jobs, for me at that time, freelancing was not even, I obviously was aware of it, but in my mind at that time, it was just not an option. I thought it wasn't stable enough. It didn't have benefits. Where would I go to an office? I think at that point we were still really stuck in a very traditional understanding of employment. And I just thought, I'm not built for that. So fast forward to I'm working for a nonprofit. I'm basically I'm working with horses for a living, which I loved, but
It's
again, not
amazing.
not particularly lucrative. And then I'm freelancing. And so really those were, when I was a little girl, I wanted to be riding and I wanted to be writing. And so I'd sort of melded those together. And, so I never, freelancing people think about it's this idea of feast or famine. I never experienced the famine part of that. Again, I was very lucky to have had someone who recommended their clients to me, which I'm pretty sure nearly all of them did come to me. And then they recommended other people. And pretty soon I was in a position where I was able to actually be picking the work that I wanted to be doing.
It's amazing.
Um, and I was doing at that point a lot more editing. I was doing a little bit of writing, but a lot more editing. And then I started to feel pulled, looking back, I keep coming up to these situations where I just keep adding more and more to my plate and eventually realizing that that doesn't really work in
Yep.
terms of existing and, taking care of yourself and maintaining relationships and enjoying life. So I found myself again sort of at this crossroads of, okay, what do I do? Um, and my work for some of my clients was really building. So with Art for Living, it had started out as a very, sporadic copy editing contract. And it just sort of built and built and built. And I found that I was really gravitating toward that work. And so again, I could see the writing on the wall. But also, I was in this really lovely chapter where I was working with this nonprofit. And I thought, looking back at that time, really what was running through my head was, how selfish am I to leave a place where I'm doing good
Hmm.
to pursue something that is feeling like it's pulling me in that direction, which is not a fair setup. It's
Right.
sort of lose-lose. But I had those thoughts running through my head for sure. And I think we grapple with a lot of that when we look at our work. So, am I feeling fulfilled personally? Am I contributing to some greater good? Am I somehow also getting paid while doing these things? Am I able to maintain some work-life balance? So these to me are ideas that come up for all of us, no matter what stage of our career that we're in. So I I made the leap, and what's interesting when I went to tell my boss at this old horse that I was going to be working with Artful Living and focusing on that. We sat down for lunch. I was so nervous. We had gone to lunch all the time, so this
Mm-hmm.
wasn't unusual, but we sat down for lunch and she reached out across the table and she grabbed my hands and she said, "I know." And I was like, "Wait, what do you know?" And she said, "I know that it's time for you to move on, and that's totally fine. And that's exactly what you need to do." And I'm pretty sure we cried over our salads because clearly, again, this idea of, having people around you who see yourself more clearly than maybe you do, that she had probably seen me having this internal struggle, and recognized that before I even did. So, she was just so gracious with that. And I think that even with, I've had lots of different freelance client relationships, things like that. And I would say, even if you end up in a situation where, let's say, you're in a workplace that you can tell it's not the right fit, or let's say you're working with a freelance client that, again, it's not going to work out, do your best to have things end in a really positive way. If it can't be positive, at least have it be civil. In part, I think like that's you never know. Some of these industries are really small. So there's the idea of, again, this might be a relationship that you come back to in the future. But I also think there's something about, the karma that you put out there of honoring these different chapters, even if you know that, a book can't be just one chapter. That would be a very long chapter. So knowing that there are going to be these different parts of your life, and that means that certain chapters have to end for other ones to begin.